we are less worried about monetization because we really believe that if we nail the experience right, then to monetize it will be much, much easier than try to squeeze every possible dollar at this stage.
Welcome back to another installment of the Next Gen Case Study Series. On today's episode, we have Sagiv Ofek, who is the founder and CEO of LibLab, a pioneering company that automates the development, production, and maintenance of software development kits for API services. Before founding LibLab in 2022, Sagiv held leadership positions at tech giants like Amazon and Facebook, and he brings a wealth of experience from his earlier entrepreneurial ventures. He also served as special forces in the Israeli army, and experience that significantly shaped his leadership style and approach to building global teams, which is why we're excited to have him on the show. Sagiv, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, the pleasure's all mine, man. I'm really excited to get into this conversation here. Before we get too far in, though, I'd love if you could, from your perspective, just share maybe a couple of minutes on who you are, where you came from, and how you ended up founding LibLab.
Yeah. Who am I? That's a very broad question, but at least in the context of LibLab, I'll say, like you clearly mentioned before LibLab, I worked at AWS, where I managed an entire team of engineers who was responsible for AWS SDKs, which is by far the most popular SDKs in the world for one of the most profitable companies ever created, right? One of the things that I learned there is that in order to keep your SDKs up to date for your APIs, you have to make sure that you automate as much as possible. So we created a lot of really good in-house tooling for that, but not every company can afford to have hundreds of engineers maintaining it for years, right? And that kind of inspired me to start LibLab. And the goal here is really, really simple and straightforward. If you're a company with an API, we're helping you to create SDKs in multiple languages in matter of seconds. So that's the background story and what we're doing in a nutshell.
So, being the founder, you obviously at the very beginning had to wear a lot of hats. There was a lot of different responsibilities or roles that you had to take on. I wonder if you could kind of share how your role has evolved over the years that you've been at the head of LibLab.
Yeah, and I'll say you were even much more hats even as a solo founder, right? Because
Mm.
usually when people start companies, they have a co-founder, and there is some sort of like divide and conquer of like, hey, you take care of the technical side, I'll take on the marketing, and so on and so forth, right? As a solo founder, you have to wear every possible hat that exists, anything from technical to go to market to just HR and anything in between. In terms of how the role has evolved over time, I'll say it's an interesting question because when you start a company, you start with nothing, right?
Mm.
So you spend like 99% of your time just convincing people. You can convince employees to join you. You should convince investors to invest in you. You should kind of convince customers to use your product. You spend all your time and energy trying to convince people to do something that you think is right for them, right? I think once you prove some sort of like initial product market fit, then you spend less time convincing and more time on executing, right? You're building a machine versus trying to kind of sell some sort of dream that might happen one day. So if at the beginning when you start or found a company, you need to really be resilient in terms of like hearing no's or having really great in-depth conversations of why people should do what you think is best for that. Over time, you evolve your role to be more on the execution side and working on some sort of machine that can execute by itself without you being hands-on all the time. You still need to convince people, you still need to talk to customers, you still need to talk to employees, you still need to talk to investors, so on and so forth. But now you also have a machine that is working alongside with you, and you're not just starting from scratch. So I'll say that's the biggest change that I saw over time of like spending less time on just being an individual contributor and trying to convince people, and then more time on now maintaining a machine or building a machine that can do a lot of that for you.
So you mentioned this machine. I love that that's kind of where you went to, because at some point, you can't keep doing one or the other. You have to focus on um, a whole different set of things inside of the business. And so, what was your approach to kind of systemizing or automating that sales process or marketing process so that you could stay focused on the other things, the other responsibilities that you have in the company?
Yeah, and then it really depends on the stage that you're at, right?
Mhm.
We were lucky enough to have enough funding so we can invest in really good automation processes, hiring the right talent, and so on and so forth. But you don't want to do that too early, right? Because I can guarantee you that if you'll spend $1 million on Google Ads, you'll get some traffic to your website, right? But
Right. Yeah.
does it mean that your product has a product market fit? Yes or no? I don't know, right? So I think it's really important to sequence it right and be very frugal on how you spend your money pre kind of product market fit stage, right? You want to talk to as many customers as possible. You want to start as many experiments as you can in order to find those initial signals that you're on the right path, right? What usually founders do, right, is they raise a bunch of money and spend it all on marketing, and then it's too late because they run out of money and they still don't have this product market fit, right? So I think if you can sequence it right, and try to stay as frugal as you can in terms of money spent pre-product market fit, right? Get all the signals, and then once you're ready to go, then it's really easy to pour kind of gasoline on the fire. But it's really important to do it in the right time. In terms of like channels that I found really useful, again, the beginning is like there is no replacement to kind of old school talk to customers and see what they like and what they don't like. And a lot of times talking to customers and see what they like and don't like actually being expressed and usage, right? Like choose your metric. It can be monetization, it can be usage. A lot of times it's not going to be the same, right? If you optimize for kind of getting money in, you might get less kind of usage. And if you optimize for usage, you might decrease your price and so on and so forth. So like you need to understand what is the metric that you want to optimize for and really like methodically kind of track it. In our case, we're still focusing on the usage part. We are less worried about monetization because we really believe that if we nail the experience right, then to monetize it will be much, much easier than try to squeeze every possible dollar at this stage and then realize that, oh, it's actually not usable or not a lot of audience find it usable.
Ah, so this is more a matter of creating really solid feedback loops that allow you to test things out and be very fluid in the development of this or the deployment of the tools or services. And then with the feedback that you collect, you kind of adapt to make sure that what you are doing is A, profitable, kind of meeting that the business requirement, but B, really serving the client so that they are sticky, so that they stay with you and continue to help fuel or support that growth.
Yeah, that's correct. The way I look at it, like the more inputs you get, the more chances you'll get it right, right? Because if you get a paying customer that can pay you $1 million a year, great. You understand what one paying customer wants. It's not necessarily going to be applied to any other customers, right? But if you have a million customers who pay you $1 a year, you can start see commonalities of what they like and what they don't like, right? And the more inputs you get, obviously, the more you can kind of aim the ship to head to the right direction.
So, kind of walk me through then what you're now that you've kind of gone through some of those refinements and things like that to really get your system dialed in. What does that map look like in terms of what the customer experience is from that point of discovery to when they, do decide to become a customer? What do you have kind of set up along that path to help serve that end goal?
Yeah, so in our case, we have two main segments. And you will hear in every playbook, don't try to attack both of them at once, but we are trying. One is the kind of the classic top-down sales-led kind of motion, and the other one is the PLG bottom-up. We're actually trying both, and we are seeing completely different personas, completely different buyer kind of cycle, completely different kind of usage for the product and different needs. But we have like the classic PLG, get started, don't talk to anyone, free tier, or even a really low tier that you can just try the product and see it yourself. And we also have the classic kind of top-down sales, SDR, marketing kind of reach outs that is focusing more on the enterprise, bigger type of companies that have specific needs. It is important to say that it's not for everyone. You need to have a lot of appetite if you are trying to kind of spread too thin on both directions, because it will require different type of velocity from different type of kind of anything from engineering to marketing to sales. It's just different personas, right? If you bring let's say an enterprise salesperson, it's not going to be the best person to talk to people startup garage mode that just want to use your product for free and then try it out, right? So it is important you'll decide in this, especially in the early stages, what is more important for you, right? Is it the PLG, just get the masses, or is it like, all right, let's just nail the sell cycles and then go after the big enterprises?
Right. And so early on, you must have faced some level of challenge or obstacles along the way, and you kind of alluded to it already, but I'd love to get you to maybe unpack that a little bit more in terms of if you're going after business in more than one way, it requires more resources, it requires more dedication or manpower. I wonder if maybe you could explore a little bit of what that experience was like refining that.
Yeah, and it also requires completely different messaging and skill sets and engineering features, right? We spend a lot of time internally, for example, building SOC 2 compliant. Most of startups don't care that you have SOC 2 or not, right? But if you're an enterprise, they are not even going to talk to you before you have a SOC 2 compliance, right? So yes, it definitely requires a lot more resources if you try both avenues at once. Um, but I think not everybody know real, at least in the early stages, which audience is more relevant for you, right? Like, is it going to be the enterprises, big companies, or is it going to be the startups? What you usually find, right, a typical flow is like start PLG, low resources, low touch, no need for a big sales and marketing department, right? And over time, graduate and grow to the enterprise side. Um, I'm not necessarily in line with this approach because I think that if the end goal is the enterprise side, you want to get those inputs as soon as possible, because if you build your entire sales motion, entire product offering, entire kind of onboarding flow that is kind of geared towards the more kind of startup small side company, when it comes to make this shift to a bigger company, you'll find a lot of gaps that will actually prevent you to graduate to where you actually want to end.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. And so when it comes to the approach of solving for these problems, do you keep things internally? Do you look to hire for in an internal team, or is this something that you like would prefer to outsource to somebody else to kind of handle and manage and get dialed in for you?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to outsource your sales, you should outsource your company. The way I see that, like, sales is a core functionality that everybody should have in-house.
Mm.
Sales is the first interaction with customers. This is where you get the best signals. Are they willing to open their wallet and pay for it? Yes or no? What feature requests they have, right? I think a lot of founders, especially founders like me who come from technical background, say that sales is not for them, and they just want to outsource it to some company that does everything for them, right? I think by doing that, you're losing a lot of the really important signals that you can get early on, right?
Mm.
At the end of the day, this is your core responsibility, right? To sell the product, right? Because if you just outsource it to someone else, you're losing one of the most important skills that you should have and develop in-house in your company.
Yeah, yeah. Having somebody inside of the company that understands it. Well, and the thing too, and I'm just reminiscent of this, the idea that you being the founder, you're the one who kind of figured out how to sell this thing to other people by banging your head against the wall until finally somebody said yes, and then reverse engineering what worked there to make it more efficient. And now you teach somebody inside of your team to continue that those efforts. So
If you want to know, maybe I'll give you that, right? If you want to know if you have a product market fit, tell someone what is your price, and their face reaction in the first 3 seconds will tell you if you have the product market fit or not, right?
right.
And if you outsource that part, you're losing one of the most important signals, right? Because you might have a really slicky and good salesman that you outsource to some other agency, but you don't know how hard was it to get this deal or not, right? You don't know if that, like, it was like super cheap price and they're happy for it, pay for it, or they like really gonna drag it along and then eventually agree to pay to something that they think is overpriced, right? So I think like those initial sales calls are really critical to founders, no matter if you're coming from sales background or not.
Right. One of the things I remember one of my early mentors telling me was that if you do a good job selling something and then you provide them with a price and they get a little bit uneasy, that's a good sign because, it might be challenging to justify that price point. However, good things that solve big problems take a little bit more of a resource. And so I'm finding that happy balance. I'm very present to the idea of like what we have can solve this big problem. This big problem can net this result for you or for whoever. And so therefore we should be able to put it at a price point that's fair for everybody across the board. And so when it comes to measuring your efforts and determining whether or not it's working, and I get that sales is kind of there are some very clear metrics. We spend $100, we get a client, we make $1,000. This is a 10x ROI, and it makes sense to keep going. But it's not always as cut and dry as that, is it? I wonder if you could share like what your insight is to how you measure what's working and what's not working.
Yeah, you need to be cautiously optimistic when it comes to that, right? Because as a founder, you have to be optimistic, right? Like I'm going to build
Yeah.
this amazing company and it's going to be awesome and everybody will love it, right? And then you come to face the real market, and
Mm.
you either are not able to sell as much or you're getting rejections. If you stay in the I'm optimistic, it will happen one day for too long, you might ignore reality, right? So you
Yeah.
have to be very, very critical with yourself, right? Like, are you getting the right feedback that you're expecting? Do customers tell you it's too expensive or do they need it at all, right? Like, really listen carefully to the feedback. I think as a founder, you have to stay optimistic for your team, for your investors, for pretty much everyone around you, but you also have to face reality, right? So whatever metrics that you have for yourself, like I want to get to X amount of revenue every year, I want to increase it by X amount of percent every year, so on and so forth, stick to that, right? And it's much easier to set metrics up front and then retrospectively look back at did I hit those metrics, yes or no? If the answer is no, it's also okay to stay optimistic, but you have to think about maybe you should pivot, maybe you should adjust, but you cannot ignore reality.
Yeah. Uh, I relate so much to that level of optimism that's almost delusional at times. You you have to convince yourself that you can do this, and then you push forward until something connects, and then when you finally, rubber meets the pavement, you can make some major progress. So this has been really great, Sagiv. I'm very grateful for the insight that you've shared so far, and we're kind of coming to the close with our time together here. I wonder if we can maybe look a little forward at some of the big goals that are on the horizon. What's coming down the pipeline that you're excited about?
Yeah, maybe I'll start with the high level. What we're trying to do in LibLab is to connect people with services, right? A service can be Slack or some API to tell you the weather or any service that you want to use. In our case, we're recording over Zoom. That's a service, right?
Right.
Right now, the way that most people connect to services is using SDKs, and you have to be a developer to do that, right? So you have to write code to say, hey, tell me what's the weather, and then get a response, right? I think that the next thing that we're thinking about, which is becoming very buzzwordy nowadays, but like it's more related to AI. Because
Mm.
when you think about AI is a kind of layer of abstraction on top of SDKs and APIs. And instead of interacting with a service using code, you can interact using just English, right? So you can say, hey, what is the weather? And behind the scene, this kind of AI agent can translate it to the right SDK call and the right API call and give you the answer. So that's for us at least just a glimpse of what we're working on LibLab.ai, which is a way to interact with services using just natural language and behind the scene doing the translation to the right API call.
Yeah, that one I'm really looking forward to. I know coding has always been a little bit elusive. I accidentally fell down the rabbit hole in building websites and got in over my head way too quickly. So I can really appreciate from firsthand experience how difficult it is, and then the work that you're doing, how valuable it is, because imagine the cool ideas that exist that um, or the cool ideas that people have that don't yet exist that could if they had access to technology that made it easier or more accessible. So it's a very valiant endeavor. I'm excited to see how that turns out. So, Sagiv, as we kind of wrap things up here, if you could maybe, I wonder, share some advice for other people who are kind of out there up to this type of work, trying to build a company or build a business or just find their way. What sort of advice would you offer somebody like that?
So I'll say even before you start, make sure that you're passionate about this domain, right? Because
Mm,
when things become hard, and trust me, they will become hard sooner or later, right? In order for you to have the grit and continue doing it for day after day, right? you have to have this passion to achieve this mission, right? If you're just mercenary and you just go kind of after opportunity that you think it will make you a lot of money, you're probably going to quit very soon, right? So I'll say just even before choosing what you want to work on, make sure that that's a topic that you're passionate about. That's a problem that you eagerly want to solve, right? Once you do that, keep in mind that things will be hard, right? Like go up and down. That's a roller coaster, and then don't give up when you're down. And obviously, don't celebrate too much when you're up. That's part of the journey.
Yeah, right. It's a roller coaster, and if you're not in it for the long haul, then you're gonna want off pretty quickly. So I love that. That's the advice. So, Gabe, if somebody wanted to reach out to you to work with you or pick your brain, what's the best way for them to do that?
Well, I'm in Twitter, Sagivo, Sagivo, or LinkedIn, Sagiv Ofek, my full name, or just go to LibLab.com and reach out.
Wonderful. We'll make sure to link to all that in the show notes when the episode is published. For those of you who are listening and watching and want to get in touch with Sagiv, that's where you'll find it. And on that note, if you wanted to get in touch with me and my team for any of your marketing needs, you can visit nextgengrowth.com. Otherwise, that's it for this episode. Thanks for joining us, and I will see you in the next.